Hello, hello. My name is Cody Cox. I'm your host, and you're listening to Real Food Mental Health. Today's guest is Lynn Mull, who is a holistic career coach, author, and leadership development speaker and facilitator. After 25 years as a Wall Street executive in people development, merger integration, and change management, she brings values based coaching to individuals and teams, which leads to aligned action. She specializes in humanizing work, reaching individual and organizational goals, and maintaining motivation while juggling family life, work, and health. Lynn developed stress relief methods and redefined life's milestones as pivotal points. Lynn provides clients and teams with a holistic and realistic approach. Lynn is also an intuitive healer and a Reiki practitioner. So today's episode is about Reiki. And basically, it's just a Japanese system of medicine. And so I find these different modalities to be really interesting because even though I think in many cases something like Reiki is actually highly stigmatized, you have to remember that it's just a different system of medicine coming from a different culture from some other place in the world. So we've got a lot of these things, like traditional Chinese medicine is another one, Ayurveda is another one. So many different modalities that could all be quite legitimate and very beneficial. Do you have questions for me that you want me to answer on the show? Maybe you have a suggestion for a topic or even a guest that I could invite on the show. I would love to hear that. Send me a message on the Signal Messenger app. It's a free app. It's end-to-end encrypted. My username is cox.07. That's COX.07. Of course, I'm not available to have ongoing conversations via Signal, but I'd still love to hear from you. Welcome to the Real Food Mental Health Podcast, where we explore the powerful connection between mental and physical health. My name is Cody Cox, a holistic nutritional psychotherapist, and I'm here to guide you on a journey to true wellness, mind, body, and spirit. If you're tired of quick fixes and want real solutions that address the root cause, you're in the right place. Let's get started on your path to lasting wellness. Welcome back to Real Food Mental Health with Cody Cox. Today I have Lynn Mull. Hi, Lynn.
Hello, Cody. Great to be here.
Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, everyone. I am Lynn, and I am as my friend called me the other day, a recovering Wall Streeter, which I thought was even more clever than my usual. So I worked on Wall Street for 25 years, ultimately retired, and I'm now a holistic career coach, author of the 24 Oracle deck, and a Reiki master. I have two girls, a husband, a little puppy who's here who loves recording podcasts. So she's chilling out next to me. And I live on the East Coast outside of Philadelphia. Even though I've lived in San Francisco, New York, I'm out in the suburbs now.
Okay, so you've been in some pretty big cities. What drew you to the suburbs?
I love San Francisco. I loved living there. I think it's like a little town with lots of things to do outdoors. Got me into yoga. New York City, super intense, and got me back closer to family, the core of Wall Street,
Mm,
and got me off of the road a little bit more. I traveled a lot less. And then I moved to the suburbs back to my hometown where my husband is now working with my dad. And I was helping care for my mom for quite a while. She's fine now, but I was in that caregiving, newly married, lots of new little babies, and just needed some more space.
yeah, so you mentioned getting into yoga in San Francisco. That does seem like the place to do that. Do you teach yoga too? I'm not sure you mentioned that.
I do. I can teach. I'm taking a little breather, but I'm teaching my first class coming up here in the spring and doing a couple of other things with a friend on a paddleboard this summer. So I'm getting back into it.
Oh,
And anytime I've led a retreat, I always do movement. But it has, living in San Francisco and doing a lot of West Coast yoga pre-COVID has definitely made me a little bit of a yoga snob. Everyone has their people, and I definitely have mine too. But it was a great place to start, and the views of my first studio were of Mount Tam, and the fog and the light would hit it, and it just gave me a really good reprieve from the stress. And I traveled a lot back then, so just also having a place to ground felt really important in Yoga studios are great at community.
Hmm. So you called it West Coast yoga. How does that differ from East Coast yoga? I'm not sure I've heard this one before.
Well, I would say that one of the biggest stories I have, Cody, which I haven't actually shared, that one time I was in a New York yoga studio and I was getting taught by someone who was on a Peloton yoga app for a while, and she was leading the class. And in the middle of it, like we're so crammed in like sardines in New York City, and I got hit in the head with someone's foot. That's East Coast yoga. It's like crowded
Gotcha.
and it's fast paced and everyone's like on top of you. And West Coast is more laid back, slow flow. Not always, I'm exaggerating, but I think there's this more space. And again, not everywhere and not in every student a studio, but just a little bit of a different come as you are mentality. Whereas New York, it was like get in, get out. It was a lot less chill for me.
Okay. Yeah, I might have guessed that. I haven't spent very much time in the East, but from what I've heard, it is very fast paced. And
Very.
I might call myself a little bit of a yoga snob myself because I did
Mm.
yoga teacher training in India.
Oh my
Very
gosh.
very traditional, very spiritual. They specifically said it's not meant to be religious, but um, there versus here in the United States, there is a huge difference. Like I call it fitness yoga in the United States, where we don't really treat it as a spiritual practice. It's more of an exercise. And so, like, I might still go to a yoga studio or to a gym class just so I can get a little practice in, but I know very well that it's not going to be a spiritual practice.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Good. That's amazing that you got to do that in India. I think New York is then that fitness level times 100. I try to bring that spirituality to my classes with prompts, and I'd love to learn more offline about that experience. I think that's what they say about Reiki. They say Reiki is not a religion, but it is so deeply spiritual that sometimes I feel like I have a deeper connection to a higher power than I ever did going to my Catholic school and my church. And so I think it rides that line, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about Reiki. I'm not sure I've really had an episode on that before. Tell us kind of what the general idea of it is.
Reiki is Rei and Ki. It's the Japanese word for universal and then life force energy. You can call it sort of that all encompassing white light. And it was founded in the 1800s by a gentleman. It was pre-plague, but there was a lot of civil war going on, and he wanted a way to heal a lot of victims, amputees, and things. And obviously, in the 1800s, we're not talking about modern hospitals. And so he ended up having a way to take his essentially healing through the hands with no touch. So it's an energy transfer while working on someone specifically. So Reiki is a way that I call it acupuncture without the needles, and I don't walk around being turned on with my Reiki powers. I really have an intentional moment, whether it's personal for meditation with myself, or if I'm working on a client or with a client. I in, I intentionally tap into their energies. And the last thing I'll say about this is I went to the Franklin Institute, which is a museum in Philadelphia, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now. And Benjamin Franklin, obviously a pioneer in light and lighting and all these things, he essentially was talking about the movement of energy through not only human beings, but through inanimate objects or wires. And it's that same idea of, have you ever walked into a restaurant and thought, I just can't eat here, something's off, or I can't rent this apartment or buy this house, it's giving me a weird vibe. That is essentially Reiki, tapping into other people's energy. Or I don't want to sit at that lunch table because something's off, right? We've done it as
Hmm.
kids, maybe when we're more pure. And I do work off of the chakra system. So that's the seven main chakras and then micro chakras to help release stuck energy and then also call in new energy once you've released that stuck energy.
Okay, so it sounds like it has some ties to traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, but it does originate from Japan, right?
Yes, that's a
Okay.
great point. So, as I've studied more, which it sounds like you have too, and you're a lifelong learner like me, that there are these Japanese call it Reiki, Chinese medicine calls it Qi. Same idea of prana, life force energy. Whether yoga is more breath work, and then in yoga has the sutras, the way in which you operate from a place of love, kindness, and Reiki has precepts. Just for today, I will not anger. Just for today, I will love all living things. Just for today, I will be humble. So it's these common threads of both internal and external kindness, support, love that it's based on.
I find it interesting how much stigma there is toward these more energetic practices. Even in Western medicine, we still there's a lot of stigma toward it, but then at the same time, we've got all this equipment to measure the energies in the body. So the MRI, the EEG, the EKG, all of these medical devices are used to measure the energy in the body. And it's just kind of funny how we ignore that. But there's definitely something there. And it's funny that you said too, you mentioned how like you might get a weird vibe if you go to rent an apartment. And I was totally thinking of an experience with that I had this morning.
Mm,
I mean, I didn't have the experience this morning, but I was thinking about it this morning where I was in Arizona and my wife and I met this landlord that she really wanted to rent to us. And it was like this small studio apartment. It wasn't particularly nice, but it was somewhat affordable. But we just got a really bad vibe from that landlord. She was really pushy. She seemed really controlling, and we ended up just leaving before we signed any contracts because we were like, we don't feel good about this. See ya. She was livid, but there was just something going on there that didn't feel right. And I don't know what would have happened if we had stayed, but I'm glad that we didn't.
right. You have these gut instincts that we're tapping into, or these, some people use the word premonition, but this idea of like, I can sort of tell I shouldn't take this road home. I just think I should turn right instead of going straight tonight. And those are those gut instincts leading from energies, whether it's something we intuitively know or we can perceive, just letting those intuitive hits come, I think is really important. And we didn't buy a house one street over, and there have been three deaths in that house for the current owner, and they're now leaving. And I'm like, I just knew. I walked into the basement and I just ran upstairs. I'm like, I got to get out of here. And so, who knows what would have happened if you would have rented, but following those little breadcrumbs, you're happy ultimately in that decision. It's like that gut check helps with decisions.
Yeah. So, do you teach yoga? Like, so yoga, Reiki. Do you do this stuff online too, or do you work mostly with people in person?
So I'm teaching my first little movement class locally at this awesome place called New House in Easton, Pennsylvania this weekend. And hopefully we'll start to do some more regular work in person. But a lot of what I've been doing in COVID, I was on an app called Live Kick, which is still live. I've done a lot of visualizations and what I've called Reiki infused yoga. So, really focusing on one chakra at a time, moving the energy, having visualizations. And I've had two surgeries in the last 18 months. So, I'm a little bit on a break from the movement piece. I'm just starting to get back. But Reiki, I do both in person, but mostly virtually. My clients are all over the US.
I've
So,
been curious
yeah.
how that works with doing Reiki remotely. I was the recipient of Reiki work years ago from
Mm,
somebody who was, I think she was in Europe, maybe.
mm.
And honestly, I'm not sure I really gained anything from it, but maybe there was just something with the way that it was being done remotely that just it wasn't working. So, how do you typically do that? How do you tune into somebody's energy remotely?
I think it can be hard to comprehend, and I can't exactly explain it. However, I do believe that there are waves of time and moving over time, but I'm a Reiki master, so I've been given the gifts of distant Reiki, which would help if, for like a really black and white example, is if someone you know is in the hospital and they're unconscious and call me and you say, Lynn, like, I really want to give this person extra healing hands. And then I can give a little virtual Reiki. You always want to ask permission. And the way I deliver it is I open the session. So I connect our energies together if we were working both virtually or in person. I call in my guides, I call in your guides, so spirit guides, spirit animals, and then I call in my own guides, which include Mary Magdalene and Raphael, the patron saint of healing. And then on top of it, we connect and I do a body scan. So these are the tenets of Reiki, whether I'm in person or not. I get deeper and more in tune with people's energy when I'm virtual. And so I actually have incorporated this into my career coaching sessions now. So we take like a 5 to 10 minute visualization together. Perhaps I'll see colors related to a chakra. Perhaps I'll hear messages. I'm clairaudient. And so it's just, I can't always explain it, Cody, but I found it to be incredibly impactful. I also like when people are in their own space. So you can put your legs up the wall, you can get in bed, you can take a shower or a bath afterwards. Like you're in this environment where you feel safe enough to open up and you're not worried about being in my studio and, oh, what Lynn has a candle burning. I wonder what that candle is. Like you're in this new space. So being in your own house can be very effective.
I can totally relate to that. As a therapist, for
Mm.
years, I've really enjoyed doing therapy online, and I don't get to do it
Mm.
very often. Of course, I did more during the pandemic.
Right.
Um, and many therapists are like, no, it's so much more effective to do it in person. And I can kind of see that because you can read each other's body language better that way when you're in person. But I've always liked what you just described, where you're in your own space. You can you can have your essential oils going or your candle
Right.
burning or whatever it is, and you're not going to be really distract or bother the other person because they are in their own space where they
Right.
can be comfortable and really be present with you.
Right.
Hopefully. Once in a while I do get clients who are like, maybe they're on their phone on a video call with me, and if they're on their phone, they tend to move around more for some reason. Like they walk around the house, they're doing dishes while they're talking to me. But if they can, even if they're just on their phone, if they can just set it down and sit still, I feel like virtual sessions can be very beneficial.
I agree. I agree to be in that space. And and there are some people who are like, I have the kids or my dog or my husband or a colleague. I want to move and get out of my house, which I understand. I think the joy of Reiki for me, wherever I am or wherever I'm doing it, is to doing it in small groups, wherever it is I can apply it and layer it with other things. So with a journaling class, having a reflection moment and helping people really sink into me where their energy is blocked, feeling into their body. Why is your heart tight? Why are you hunched over? Opening that up and giving them some ideas or practical ways to open up where they do feel stuck. And then I had someone in Reiki training who she was a chef and she was infusing positive energy into the food she cooked. She was working a lot with a cancer patients and she was a private chef out in LA. And so there's all these different modalities where you can bring in a higher calling or a higher power using your intuition, helping you make decisions, helping people with their careers, reducing burnout, and that all can be done using tidbits of Reiki without having an hour-long session, and that's what I've started to do is mold it and meeting people where they are.
How did you originally find Reiki?
I was really looking to maintain my mental health and talk. I've done talk therapy over the years. I've done yoga, as I've mentioned, but what are other ways that could support my physical and mental health as a mom, caregiver, all, as a someone who was so stressed out from managing a huge amount of work in corporate America. And it was in a book, and Kelsey Patel's book, Burning Bright, she ended up becoming one of my Reiki teachers. But she said, if any part of this interests you, I have trainings. Look on my website. And I did, and I never looked back. I found it to be very intriguing. And maybe, Cody, it really validated my intuitive powers, my clairaudience and clairvoyance that I'd been avoiding, or not avoiding, but ignoring. And it was just I following a breadcrumb. So I recommend listeners, like if you're interested in knitting, try knitting. If you're interested in gardening, try it. And maybe it'll lead you nowhere, but maybe you'll end up becoming an herbalist who's making concoctions and sending them to me for my clients or your clients. Or
Mhm.
maybe you'll end up taking a yoga class with a Reiki teacher and then wanting to do that. It led me to write an oracle deck, right? So all these things unfolded without any expectation. I just had a really curious mind.
It's really interesting how I think deep down most people want to get into these kinds of things, whether it's like the herbalism that you mentioned, or lately I've actually been a student of homeopathy. And honestly, I was kind of resistant to get into it because maybe it was the stigma, or I'm not sure what it was, but there was a resistance. But somehow deep down, I felt like I needed to learn about it anyway. And it's been
Mm,
fascinating. It's actually a very complex system of medicine, and it's actually kind of based on the energies of things too. So if you're familiar with Dr. Emoto, he was a Japanese scientist. I think he died fairly recently, but he
mm,
specialized in the study of water.
hmm,
And he found that if you basically gave energy to water, it would develop these different crystal like structures that you could
hmm,
see under a microscope. And so he would do these experiments. There's this one pretty prominent experiment that he used to do called the rice experiment, where he got three different glasses of water and he would put rice in each one. And every day for a month, he would say to one of them, "Thank you." And the second one, he would say, "You're an idiot." And the third one, he would completely ignore. So, all of these glasses of water, all three of them, same water, same rice, but just different words, different energy to each one. After a month, the thank you one actually started to ferment. And I can't remember the difference between the other two, but essentially they were both rotting. They were turning black. They were going moldy. Interestingly, I replicated this experiment. So, like, you can actually find that on YouTube if you
I
just look
can't wait to
for,
look.
yeah, if you just look for the rice experiment, or maybe Dr. Emoto. There are some other videos on YouTube about him too. But I replicated that experiment. And it wasn't in the best of conditions because it was in the summertime where and I was in a place where I didn't have air conditioning. So it wasn't climate controlled, but it still worked. The
Mm.
positive one, I actually added a fourth one. I had one that I said I love you to. So I had two positive ones and two negative ones. And the two positive ones were fermenting. It totally worked. It was amazing. And the way I see that and homeopathy, they actually kind of tie together, because homeopathy, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but um, most commonly, at least in the United States, it's sugar pills. So that would be the physical presence of the homeopathic medicine. And that's where it gets a lot of stigma, because physically we look at it and it's like, oh, well, it's just sugar pills. It must be a placebo. But energetically, each of the homeopathic medicines are different. So they take these sugar pills and they spray them with this water that's been infused with this energetic frequency. And so each medicine has a different energetic frequency, and that's what creates that medicinal benefit that you get from homeopathy.
It's so fascinating. And so essentially, that is a level of energy. You're changing the energy. And then when your neurons take that pill, and you are able to absorb it into your cells, you're changing your neurons. It's creating this chemical reaction. The I I just love it. I think it's fascinating, and you know that there are people who tend to be more, their science shows there's some people whose brains are wired more negatively, some are wired more positively, and how can you do things like we're talking about to change or edit the chemistry of how we react, how we show up. I think it's fascinating. And
It
a
is.
firm believer. And even if you don't, it's like, even if you don't, why not try it?
And I can't help but think, I know I talk a lot about nutrition. My listeners are pretty used to that at this point, but I can't help but think that nutrition has some energetic properties to it as well. So, for example, a steak from a grass-fed pasture-raised cow is probably going to have more energetic value than that steak that comes from a factory farmed cow.
I mean, they always said happy cows that, advertisements are funny now versus
Hmm.
20 years ago, but happy cows come from California, and they would show this pasture and the cows out, and then they would say happy butter comes from happy cows. They had this whole ad, and there's something to it.
Yeah, I remember those commercials. Um, but now, like, it seems like I still kind of see that a little bit from California, like maybe not as much, but now I'm looking for the pasture raised. I'm looking for the grass fed, not the grain fed. And there are different levels, right? So some cows are pasture raised, but they're still fed grains as a supplement. And some cows are fully pasture raised and they're only eating grass and hay.
Mm.
And some cows are only fed grains because they're kept in tight quarters. And so there are varying levels of that, the energetic quality, nutritional quality that you could get.
And something that I've been doing, and we didn't talk about this before we hit record, but one of the pieces that's very popular right now in media is the gratitude practice. And you sort of are leaning into this in the water, like, thank you so much, water with the rice, and then it's fermenting. And so for me, for a long time, especially having my own physical ailments, it felt a little vacant. Like, I would say thank you to my day. I would say thank you to my kids for putting their clothes away. I would say thank you to my clients. But the reality is, I couldn't see the one to one. And what I've been doing now is saying thank you or sending something out. So sending 5 emails a week, sending it out, and then usually get a response when you're doing it direct, like a cause and effect thank you versus into the universe. So Oprah Winfrey might not agree 'cause she's all about the gratitude journaling, but instead of just writing it into a blank piece of paper, I am now sending it energetically out. And it's been fun. A couple of weeks ago, I sent out postcards, like old school postcards, into the mail. And it was like, thank you so much for this snail mail. And it was good to reconnect. And then it started a whole other conversation. So sometimes, if we want that energy to get going, we need to also put that out there, like you're saying. Like, say thank you to a friend instead of the cup of rice, or say thank you to your spouse, or say thank you to your, just sort of that idea of the boomerang of positivity feels a lot different to me than that flat piece of paper, like I was saying.
Yeah, like really put it out there in the universe. That makes sense. And I can't help but think that even conventional psychotherapy technically is energy healing in many
Hmm.
ways. Because, I mean, the brain works through energy, right? It's sending signals to other organs, it's receiving signals from other organs, especially the gut. But what are those signals? They're energy. And so, as
100%.
we work through like a psychotherapeutic modality, or if it's energy healing like Reiki or something else, all of this uses energy, positive or negative. So, I practice EMDR, and
Mm.
I'm not sure where I heard this, but I heard that it is a form of energy healing, and it does make sense to me. I don't think that was explicitly taught to me in the training, but it does make sense because as we are going through somebody's trauma, we are essentially changing the energy in the brain and how that manifests for that person.
I believe that. And exactly. Like there are different modalities that are tapping into either the same or similar points, all to release what is stored. So if you're storing the trauma, if you're storing the old story about how you're terrible because your last boss told you you weren't perfect, or you just want to move that energy. And so when I talk about it, is I want, it's like a plumber. I don't want to work to create a new career path, or I don't want to work to create some new project or a new book or whatever people's purpose is until they've cleaned out the pipes. So I really want to focus on what's not working and just acknowledge it. Hey, I've been storing these emotions. I've been overworking myself and it's stuck in my right hip. So energetically, I can see that in a different color, or I can see it as gray matter sitting on someone's hip. And I work using my Reiki symbols and my training to move that energy out. Because you wouldn't pay the plumber if he left all the hair clogging the pipes, right? And he just added Drano and never got it out. You need the tools to move it. And then you're like, okay, the water's flowing, the energy's flowing. Now, what's your intention? What's your intention for this next phase? Or for you, it's how can the brain and body and nutrition work together? And I like that we're coming at it from different angles to meet people where they are. So for me, career, for you, the nutrition, for the psychotherapy, right? It's the different components to help heal whatever they need, or moving with me, doing visualizations. It can all be a transition in a safe way.
Now, careers are an interesting thing. I think a lot of people get caught up in just the job that they have or using the degree that they have because it's almost like they feel like they're betraying themselves if they
Mm,
change, even though they decide that they dislike it.
right? Living in the shoulds.
Yes, living in the shoulds. So, for example, many male therapists really struggle in this profession because, quite frankly, I think most people just would rather have a female therapist.
Mm,
And but there are a lot of men who just stay in the profession because they're like, I did all this work, so many years of school, so many years of clinical training, supervision, finally got my independent license, but I'm not making any money.
mm.
Or I'd rather do something else. And so what would you tell a person like that? Like maybe it's not a therapist, but just somebody they've put so much work into what they're doing, but they decide that it's just not working for them. How should they go about making a transition?
Well, I like to walk through a process and not necessarily leap, which we were talking about before we hit record, is that sometimes you'll see on social media, or these big aha moments of celebrities, and they just said, I just took the leap and I moved to LA with $1 in my pocket. And that's just not really realistic. And so what I like to do is lining up these big visions you have of what you do want to be doing. Maybe you want to become a doctor, or you want to become a nurse, or you want to become a book, you want to write a book, or you want to be a ghostwriter, whatever the thing is you want to do next. Recognizing that you had a season of your life where you wanted to do one thing, and then your circumstances changed, or your desires changed, and that's normal to have these milestone moments that wake you up. But then focused on purpose. So what's your why? Why do you want to make the change? And then aligning it to their values. So for me, structure is really important. What job can I have that gives me structure? Or I have some clients who are really, really into fairness. They want everything to be fair. And so they should really be in like a scientific field because they want it to be this perfect equation. So lining up your purpose and your values, and then you start to make decisions on what you should do next. And then there usually is a transition period, but I help people network into that next space with a lot more clarity.
You mentioned sense of purpose, and it seems like I run into that being an issue for many, many people. And essentially, that's a spiritual issue. I mean, we lose this sense of belonging or this sense of identity, you might say, and that can be really unmotivating. It can make us hate our jobs. It can make us I would say maybe unvisionary. Like we don't feel free to dream. We just feel stuck.
So stuck. I appreciate that. I was definitely there. And we often coach or teach what we need for ourselves. And so understanding that you're in a transition and it's normal to regroup. I was with a group last week, and one of the gentlemen leading the group, I was in an office building and we are talking about leadership and finding your purpose and reconnecting with that sense of self. And one of the gentlemen said, I'm so sick of doing the same projects I've done every 5 years in my career. Like the same type of projects keep popping up. He's like, I've done that one. I've done that one. And it's really a detachment from some of those outcomes and allowing your ego, you know this better than me, but allowing your ego to separate from the outcomes of work, having a true sense of self. And not everyone financially is going to be able to stop working and become a freelancer or go back to school full time, but it's finding ways to take micro steps to that path. Perhaps it is meditating, perhaps it is journaling, perhaps it is working with a coach to help you figure out what do you want outside of those outcomes? Because in college, it's quote unquote easy. You get a grade on a paper, you get a grade on a class. In high school, same thing. And then we go into the real world, and maybe the feedback stops becoming you're the best, you're the best, you're the straight A student. And is that really what is most important? Probably not. And so our purpose might evolve over time. And we're this generation, I'm a Gen Xer. And I think that our parents did not help us see that there are multiple careers to be had in our lifetime. Most of them were living, the boomer generation is really, I worked at this company, I got a pension, this is it. And we then are sandwiched between Gen Zers who want to freelance and have a gig economy and not work for the man. And we're like, wait, but we know we need a pension or we know we need this 401k or we have a recognition of our financial obligations and then we want the life of a Gen Z. So I think emotionally we're a little stunted and we have to it's okay not to know.
Yeah, I like to kind of go back into evolution,
Mm.
ancestry. What was it that our ancestors were doing that was right? Most of the
Oh.
time for them, it was they were living off the land. They were
Huh.
very communal. They were essentially following their passions because they didn't have to worry so much about money.
It was more
And
bartering.
and yeah, I think the money really creates a lot of problems for us
Mm.
Americans. And it's like you were saying, we are very superficial. We um, obsess over our performance or how we appear to other people. But what is it that we truly want deep down? Most likely, it's something more wholesome, something that might, frankly, not be very lucrative. If we could all go back to that, then I think our lives would be so much better. But the reality of it is we have bills to pay because we live in a very expensive country.
So
so
expensive.
so how do we find a balance between that where it's like I want to learn about homeopathy even though I know I'm not going to make money off of it, but then at the same time I've got bills to pay.
Right. So for me it's about having it essentially what people call side hustles. It becomes this new age today version of a hobby. And so your hobby is this looking into some of these other modalities. My hobby was creating and writing an oracle deck. It eventually has taken off in a way that I am making some money off of my oracle deck, but maybe this homeopathy won't, but maybe the next thing will. And it is sort of this energetic exchange. I was even thinking today, I have a friend who's a photographer and I need some new headshots because my hair's grown. And I'm like, let's barter. So there are ways to create an energy exchange and a with your passion. And we need to be more patient. You might end up making money off of your love of some of these other modalities, but it's never right away. And we have
Mhm.
the Kardashians and reality TV to blame for that. It's like, oh, I have a million followers. Well, did you see that before they had a million followers, or this big reality TV show, or this makeup brand, that they did all this other work, or they never saw their family? There's always this backstory. So I think it's a mix, Cody, of hard work, perseverance, energy exchange, staying on the path, or staying on a path but tweaking it. We don't often give ourselves the ability to look at the Venn diagram of our lives and say, what can I do that overlaps that will give me a little bit more happiness and maybe a little less money, but I'm still making the bills? We always
Mhm.
want to go to these extreme places.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense for most people, even if you went through yoga teacher training, to just become a full-time yoga teacher. Because that's another one, especially if you're practicing traditionally, that's not really going to make you money. It's still a very good thing, but maybe you could do that on the side of something else.
And knowing why you're doing it. So you're
Yeah.
doing it for yourself, or you're doing it to impart wisdom, or to pay it forward and train others on your wisdom that you learned in India. Why do I volunteer at my kid's school or for my child's volleyball team? It's not exactly how I want to spend every Tuesday afternoon, but I'm doing it to see my daughter learn and grow. I'm doing it to connect with the other parents who I don't know that well because we live not that close to the school. So there's another motivation for me donating my time. But once that stops being the case, maybe I'll volunteer somewhere else. Maybe then it'll be time to volunteer at the library or somewhere else that helps me. It evolves. And sometimes I think we forget that that evolution might feel funky because our nerves are so set in our ways. The money piece is hard. It is a reality. But there are other ways to feed that purpose without it also being a billion-dollar adventure.
I like that you mentioned kind of a personal evolution because that really does happen. And I immediately thought, when I was younger, I never would have been interested in holistic modalities whatsoever.
Right?
And maybe it was that stigma. Maybe it's just because socially, like when you're a teenager, you just want to fit in with other teenagers. So socially, I would have been like, no, I'm not interested in that because it just isn't very popular. Thankfully, I think it's growing in popularity, but now I'm like, I don't want to do anything conventional. I've changed quite a lot. I have evolved on a personal level. And so I think that's okay to just kind of follow that intuition that you have. It might lead you to things that you never would have expected. Like I mentioned earlier, I was kind of resistant to the homeopathy, but deep down I kind of felt like I should learn about it.
So
And
what's your
so,
favorite part? I'm not supposed to interview the podcast host, but what's
oh,
been your
you're fine.
favorite part? What's been your favorite part of
I'm
this
I'm
stepping
I'm
in?
honestly only a few months into it.
That's okay.
But my favorite part is just knowing that you can have this medicine. Technically, it is commercialized, but it's not nearly as lucrative as like pharmaceutical drugs. And so it feels more ethical to me when you
Mm.
look at the finances of it. But then also, homeopathy has pretty much no side effects because it is the energetic medicine, and you do take it in a pill form, but physically it's just sugar, like I mentioned. And so you can't really overdose on it. And you can't
Wow.
really, if you do it wrong, maybe you take the wrong remedy, the worst that's going to happen is it just won't work. It's sugar pills. But the best that can happen is that it does work. And so that's what I love about it. There's pretty much no side effects. It's very inexpensive. Insurance probably won't cover it. Maybe it depends on the practitioner you're seeing, but it's so inexpensive. You can get a homeopathic medicine for like $8 at
I mean, that's
many
amazing.
grocery stores, including Walmart. So,
Maybe I didn't actually know that, but maybe the HSA will, right? Those
yeah, I think you can use an HSA. Like I said, I think it depends on the practitioner. If you are seeing a licensed clinician and they can take your insurance and they happen to have that homeopathy training, then you could probably use insurance for homeopathy. So, but you couldn't, for example, see like a traditional naturopath or a yoga teacher who gives you a homeopathic medicine and expect to have insurance pay for it.
Yeah. I, so part of what's interesting to me is that my mom and dad are very, I would say, devout Catholics. Now, since COVID, they're not at mass all the time, but my dad was like, God does not see you unless you're in that pew once a week, holy days. Like my dad, my mom less so, but my dad was like, we are going. And I really broke away from that when I moved to California. I started to really meditate and have spiritual moments in the redwood trees. Like I once I lived in California, and also once I lost a few people in my life, I started to connect with them in different, my grandparents passed, and so I would connect with them in different ways through different signs, through different modalities. And what's interesting to me is my mom survived colon cancer, stage 3 colon cancer. She survived. She had multiple surgeries, multiple things, and now she's coming to me and saying, Lynn, have you read Mel Robbins' Let Them? And did you know your energy can change your insides? And did you know that if I think positively, that cancer won't grow back? So it's just fascinating that even if it's because of popularity or maybe a Mel Robbins being famous and putting a book in my mom's hand to sort of release some of this anger and triggering, I think that there is an evolution. Society is picking ourselves up and saying we don't need to lean on these pharma companies, or we don't need to lean on everyone being bought and sold. There's this capacity for us to make our own self-awareness concoction and internalize that. And I think that's a lot of what you and I are trying to teach. It's like we have a lot more control than just popping that pill. Listen,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be on this podcast if I didn't have a Western surgeon to get rid of my rare cyst in December. So I have a lot of doctor friends who I admire and care about and love and appreciate. But there is this other component where in between these major events, how are you taking care of yourself? Your food, your energy, your brain, your heart, feeding ourselves with positive energy. And I don't mean spiritually bypassing positive energy. I mean, like, I really want to feel good, and this is what I need to do today. I'm going to go on a walking meditation. And you brought up something else I wanted to touch back on real fast is sound bowls and sound baths are really popular right now.
Oh, yeah.
It's all energy. And so I have been meditating with a certain frequency of music. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, what I needed at this stage in my physical recovery and my mental space as I level up to my next section of my career coaching, I just think there's ways that we can tap in, and that those sound waves are energy. It's all the same thing you and I are talking about.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people really like music, especially younger people. It seems like as you
Yeah.
get older, you get more into the podcasts and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
But music is a very energetic medium. So, I mean, for example, how do you feel when you listen to screamo versus this soft, we could call it like a meditative or a yoga type music? Like, you definitely feel a difference, and it's not just emotionally; it's energetically. There's something happening within you as you listen to these different sounds.
If anyone's ever been through a breakup, you always know you have those breakup songs that trigger you and get a release, or you go to that concert and you're just like, yes, and the somatic release of the dancing or moving to the beat or focusing on the verbal expression of the lead singer. It's just, it is. And I think a lot of people can connect to that space. My children have not been to a concert yet, my two girls, and I'm hoping that I might take them in a couple of weeks. We have a pretty mellow band coming, so I want to see how they react to that type of environment with headsets on, of course. But
Do they play music like with
my one
instruments?
daughter plays the piano, and the other one does not. But yeah, she can hear music and she can hear like a song once, and she has the ear to pick up the chorus like right away, pick up a lot of words. I'm like, I've never known those words from that song, and she can do it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in learning to play music on an instrument or even many instruments. It
Mm,
does teach you to listen to the different sounds and to really value the energetic properties of that music. And maybe it's
yeah.
not explicitly taught that way, but that's kind of how I learned. I was in band for
Mm,
like 6 years, so middle school and high school, and haven't really played much since, but I am very grateful that I was into music when I was younger because it set me up to think in a certain way and to
mm.
notice the value of sounds and feelings where I'm not so sure I would have learned that without music.
Yeah, that honing in, paying attention, the structure of it. I think it's good for her.
Have you ever led a sound bath?
I haven't. I haven't. I do have a drum for Reiki circles.
Okay.
So it's I don't know what kind of animal skin it is off the top of my head, but I have it is a drum made of animal skin, and then it has some decoration on it, and it's tied in the back with a leather, and then you beat it with a little stick that also has a different kind of animal fur, and it was blessed by a Reiki master up in Fairfield, Connecticut. And then I do have Tibetan, which is a little bit different than the glass singing bowls. It's a Tibetan copper bowl that I use sometimes just to sort of shake people up or to wake them up or to shift the energy of the session.
hmm I got a little singing bowl from
You
India
do?
when I did my yoga teacher training, and I like the bigger ones because they have a richer sound. But I just didn't
Yeah.
have the suitcase space to bring home a big one. But they're kind of fun to just sit. I'm not sure what mine's made out of. I think it might be brass. It's kind of fun to just sit and try to get that mallet to make the bowl ring, and
Yeah.
it really does resonate.
It vibrates.
If you can get it going, it can really resonate. I was thinking too when I was in graduate school. I went to I wouldn't say it was a holistic graduate school, but it was definitely unique because they had some cool things as far as like workshops and stuff went. One of the workshops I went to
Mm.
was therapeutic Native American drumming.
Hmm.
And it was taught by one of the faculty members that just happened to be Native American.
Hmm.
I can't remember what tribe she was from, but she happened to be Native American, and she drove down from California to campus to and brought all these drums with her.
Huh.
And we just as a group sat in a circle and we drummed together, and it was actually a really cool experience. There was just something with, I think it was the music, but then there was also this sense of community or this tribal feeling
Mm.
that it felt like a healing experience, even though I was only sitting in that room for like an hour. Like it wasn't that long, but I loved it. I wish I could do something like that again.
I don't know, maybe we're onto something. Maybe that's the playing we're talking about for ourselves as much as we're
Yeah.
talking about for clients or listeners to just try. Or maybe you won't like it. Maybe you won't, maybe that won't be your thing, but maybe you'll like a part of it that will, you'll meet someone at the drum circle that will inspire you to take up guitar. Whatever it is, I think it's following those ideas. If you want to shift or learn and grow, staying stagnant, whether it's in your body or in your mind, having a fixed mindset is not the way to have a long, happy life. It's just really being able to stay open. But you're allowed to have preferences. You're allowed to say, maybe that drum circle, I loved it, but I want to try XYZ instead. I was able to teach at a wellness spa retreat center in the middle of Pennsylvania. It's called the Poconos, and they have three enormous, I mean, huge, huge three singing bowls in their lobby, almost as big as the back seat of a small car. I mean, they were huge. And to get that thing to get those bowls going as people are walking in, it's quite spectacular. And even those, you could see some of the people coming to the spa didn't really know what they were doing or getting into. And just to see their faces change as they were walking through those front doors as the bowls were being played, I just love that idea of recognizing something new and feeling that vibrational change. And lastly, I'll say is all of this stuff has been around. You're talking about ancient Indian, Native American practices. I'm talking about 1800s in Japan. You're talking about, these different musical instruments that have been around for ages. It's all bringing it to where we are now in society. You and I didn't create these things. They've been around forever.
Yeah, good point. Really, it's just different modalities from different parts of the world and different times in history. It's not that they're bad. They might seem weird to us because it's not part of mainstream American culture. I think increasingly kind of it is, at least at a sub level, but these things have been around, some of them for thousands of years. I mean, yoga is over 3,000 years old. And we're just now discovering the benefits that it has. Even if you're just doing the fitness yoga in America, like maybe you're going to your gym and you're doing a yoga class and they just teach it from a strictly physical standpoint, you're still benefiting from that. And it could be better if it was a little bit more spiritual, but even just doing the asanas and a short shavasana at the end, you're
Right.
still getting a benefit from that.
I think it's funny too that people, especially when in New York, would leave in Shavasana, they're too busy, and now, it's my favorite part. And it shouldn't be skipped because it's that moment of integration at the end of a practice or a flow. And there are different types of yoga that I've done over the course of, I'm in my late 40s. And so it's changed over time. And you should meet yourself where you are. And there are these components of what people think is different or weird, but we're really doing them in our everyday life. Maybe it's just coming at it from a different angle. So
Hmm.
if you believe in, I believe in spirit guides, maybe you believe that your grandparents are giving you messages, or maybe you believe that dreams are messages, whatever it is. Or if you're praying to Jesus or a God in a church, it's not that different than having a moment to pray to Mother Earth. When you really think about it, there's not a lot that we're all looking to find that connection to a higher purpose. But my work in this phase in my career is helping people see their own light within themselves and making decisions from there. Because otherwise, we could get wrapped around the axle quite easily, as we were talking about, right? There's all these different
Yeah.
modalities. And people just need to have more fun with it and be a little light in a time in the world where there's a lot of chaos and a lot of angst. It's go within, zoom in, as I say. We zoom out a lot. We look at the macro, we look at the news, but what do you need right now? What does your family need? What do you need? It's a much easier way to simplify and get a lot less stressed out. I'm not saying ignore, just sometimes we need to go within.
So we're coming up on the end of our episode, and I was going to ask, what do you think is the most important message that
Mm,
people need to hear based off of what we've been talking about today? But I'm kind of hearing this strong theme of just be open to that personal evolution. Am I right? Or is there something else that pops into your mind?
yes, and the answers are within. We're tapping into these bigger picture universal energies or the science and the modalities that you're talking about with nutrition, but also know what you need might be different from what I need, and that's okay. And so looking within is really important and not selfish. It's self-care, especially as we get older.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to do the same thing for your whole life if it doesn't
No.
feel right for you. You can branch out, do something else entirely, or maybe just something else on the side. I think hobbies are important. We didn't really talk about hobbies, but your hobby can be a side income if you want it to be, or maybe it's
Yeah.
just that you're studying Reiki or homeopathy or acupuncture or something else, just more for fun or to help friends and family. That can give you a sense of purpose just by doing that while you still have some kind of full time career. But just play around with it, and you'll find what works for you as long as you're open to that personal evolution. One last thing, Lynn, how can people find you if they want to learn more about you and maybe work with you?
Well, I just also want to say before we get off, this was lovely and so fun to just have a conversation. I think we've touched on so many things. So thank you for holding this space. And You can find me at lynnmull.com, where I have my offerings for holistic career coaching, so maybe some more online offerings coming up in 2025. And you can find me on Instagram at underscore Lynn Mull. And I'm on Substack quite regularly, always linked through my Instagram, but that is also the Clarity Collective on Substack.
And you wanted to mention your oracle cards too.
Yes, so I created the 24 Oracle deck, which we touched on throughout the episode. If you use the code 10, TEN, with a capital TEN, you will get 10% off of the Oracle deck. And I hope there's lots of information on my website or there's a couple other ways to learn more about it. If you have any questions, I do respond to my DMs myself or my email, so feel free to reach out. And I just loved spending this rainy morning with you and all of your listeners.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review. That really helps me out. And also subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. Real Food Mental Health is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. The information presented on this podcast is not intended to replace any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. While I am a healthcare provider, I am not your provider. Always seek the advice of an appropriate healthcare practitioner with any personal questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Reliance on information provided by this podcast is at your own risk.